Hi, it's Chris from Holy Trinity, and I would like to help you get ready for the sacrament of confirmation. We're going to do that in 3 short videos. I think the best way to understand the sacrament of confirmation is to go back to the Bible and read the stories about St. Peter. He's a very, very interesting guy. And if all you know about St. Peter is that he's one of the apostles or that he was one of Jesus's disciples, then you've really kind of missed some good stuff about him. So let's start at the beginning. The day that Peter meets Jesus, Peter has a job as a fisherman, and he's out on this boat, and he's been fishing all night long, and he's caught a grand total of 0 fish. It's not great if your job is to catch fish and you don't catch any fish. But as you'll see, that kind of thing is kind of par for the course for Peter. Jesus sees him out on the boat from where he's standing on the shore, and he calls out to Peter, "Put your net on the other side of the boat." And at first, Peter grumbles because he's been up all night and he's tired. But for Jesus, he says he'll give it another try. And he throws his net on the other side of the boat, and it says he pulled in so many fish that his boat began to sink. And Peter and the other fishermen had to get to shore as quickly as possible, so they started rowing. But when they got there, Peter falls on the ground in front of Jesus and he says, "Leave me alone. Depart from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." You'd think he might say something like, "Thank you," or "Wow, that's amazing." But Peter has this wonderful way of always saying exactly the wrong thing. Peter is one of those guys whose mouth is always getting him into trouble. And this is not the only example we get from the Bible of Peter messing up. Another boat story. Peter and the other disciples are on this boat, and they're going from one side of the lake to the other side of the lake. And in the middle of the night, they look out and they see Jesus walking across the water, and Peter stands up and he says, "Wow, you can walk on the water. I want to walk on the water too. Lord, call me out of the boat, and I will walk on the water to you." And Jesus says, "Come on, come to me." And Peter gets out of the boat, and he steps on the water, and he face plants in, and he starts to sink, and then he panics, and he screams for help. And Jesus has to come and get him out of the water and put him on the boat. And he says, "Do you not have any faith in me? I told you you could walk on the water. You saw me doing it. Why did you still doubt?" Another time, Jesus is talking to his disciples and he says, "The time has come for us to go to Jerusalem, and when we get to the city, I will be arrested and I am going to die. And 3 days later, I will come back to life, having conquered the sins of all mankind. For this I have come to the world." And Peter looks him right in the eye and says, "Maybe we shouldn't. That sounds scary. We should go up in the mountains and hide up there, and then no one can kill you." "Your plan sucks, Jesus. Let's try my plan." Jesus tells Peter, "Get out of my way, you Satan." That's gotta hurt. The night that he has his last supper with the disciples, Jesus tells them, "One of you is going to betray me." And Peter stands up right away and says, "Not me. I would never betray you." And Jesus says, "You are actually going to betray me not once, but 3 times tonight." And it happens. And then the high priest of the temple and all the temple guards show up at the garden to arrest Jesus. And Peter pulls out his sword. Bet you didn't know he carried a sword throughout the whole Bible, did you? Whacks off one of the guards' ears. And Jesus actually stops Peter and says, "You fool! I told you I was coming here to die. Why are you trying to stop this?" And that night, some people see Peter and they say, "Weren't you with Jesus when he came into the city?" And he said, "That wasn't me." And then they said, "You sound just like him. Aren't you from Galilee too?" And he said, "That wasn't me." And then one woman says, "It is you. I saw you. I recognize you." And Peter says, I never met that man. I would never betray you. And Jesus says, you are actually going to betray me not once, 3 times, but 3 times tonight. All through the gospel, Peter is the guy who says the wrong thing, does the wrong thing, gets in trouble, makes a fool of himself. And it does happen that after Jesus has resurrected and ascended into heaven and left the earth, that the disciples are gathered together trying to figure out what they're going to do next. And they're so afraid that the thing that happened to Jesus is just about to happen to them that they lock themselves in a room with the doors and the windows shut. And they pray to God, please, can't you do something? Can't you help us? Can't you fix this? Save us! But after 9 days together, they have a vision of the Holy Spirit coming down like fire, and there's a noise like wind. Peter is the guy who goes over to the window and he opens it up, and then he walks out onto the balcony and he starts talking to the people on the street down below, and he says, I knew a man named Jesus. He was put on the cross and he willingly went to his death, and when he died, he rose back to life, and he's promised us that when we are baptized in his name and we reject a life of sin and accept a life of grace, he will raise us too. The guy who always said the wrong thing, always did the wrong thing, had this moment with the Holy Spirit, and for the first time in his life, he opened his mouth and it was the right thing that came out. In fact, that morning, the whole collection of followers of Jesus were locked in a room, and there was about 15 of them. And by the end of the day, because of what Peter had said, there were about 3,000 Christians that lined up and asked Peter to baptize them and became followers of Christ. From 15 to 3,000. And Peter's the guy that did it. Now, in all these stories, Peter sort of speaks before he thinks. He's impulsive, and it's always gotten him in trouble. But on this day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit finally came, the other disciples were all too smart to go out and tell the world about Jesus. So they stayed in that room. God needed someone who wasn't going to think too much. And is Peter the guy who's not going to think too much? He's the one. All along, Christ had a plan for Peter. I need you to be on my team, because everybody else is going to overthink, and sometimes I need a guy who won't. Peter wasn't perfect, but he was exactly what God was going to need. In just the right place, on just the right day, he was just the right guy. The sacrament of confirmation celebrates that God has put in you just the right gifts to make a difference in the world, to change somebody, change their life, change their mind, change their path. And no one is going to be able to do that but you. You are the one God has sent to do something wonderful. And we might not know just yet what that thing is going to be. But our faith tells us that you are not an accident. Your life, not random chance. The situation you find yourself in today is part of the story that God is writing. You're a big part of it. In our next video, we're going to talk about the ways that you can see the Holy Spirit at work and recognize what the Spirit is doing when He's doing it.